More breaking news overnight. An appeals court pausing a lower court's ruling that gave control of the California National Guard back to Governor Gavin Newsom. That means President Trump will be able to keep the California National Guard active on the streets of Los Angeles for now, as more immigration and Trump protests are planned over the weekend. And that legal battle plays out as there's new fallout after this dramatic scene. Democratic Senator Alex Padilla of California forcibly grabbed and removed from DHS Secretary Kristi Noem's press conference yesterday. And take a look at this. After being pulled out of that room, the senator is then pushed to the floor. And three officials hold him down, handcuffing his hands behind his back. A sitting U.S. senator being handcuffed for the whole world to see. NBC News correspondent David Noriega is live in Los Angeles. Also with us, MSNBC legal analyst Carol Lam. She's a former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of California and former California Superior Court judge. Carol, let's start with these overnight court rulings. As of now, the California National Guard is still under President Trump's control, at least until Tuesday when the appeals court has set this hearing. What do you make of where we are right now?
Well, Anna, this wasn't completely unexpected that the appellate court was going to step in and perhaps put a pause on the district court judge's ruling that came out yesterday. They did it very quickly, but even Judge Breyer on the district court said he wasn't going to have it take effect. He wasn't going to have his ruling take effect until noon today, suggesting that he expected there would be an appeal by the government, and that the Ninth Circuit would perhaps want a chance to weigh in here. What this really does is it puts a stay on Judge Breyer's ruling. Everything is as it was before. However, I do think that both sides are aware that the conduct that takes place over the next few days could, in fact, impact the Ninth Circuit's evaluation of the case here, and perhaps there will be a little pulling back on both sides to make sure that they aren't viewed as going overboard in the intervening days.
So Judge Breyer, again, the brother of Justice Breyer, he is this lower court judge who ruled for California before the appeals court had paused it, and he did not mince words. Judge Breyer saying, quote, "We're talking about the president exercising his authority, and the president is, of course, limited to his authority. That's the difference between a constitutional government and King George." Carol, this judge ruled very quickly, and he actually went beyond what the state had asked for. He called the president's actions pertaining to the National Guard illegal. Where do you think this is headed, and how long could this legal battle end up lasting?
Well, it may not seem like things are moving very fast to people on the ground, but for the court system, this actually is pretty fast. The Ninth Circuit said the state can actually file their papers on Sunday, and then the federal government can file their papers on Monday, and then there will be oral argument by Zoom on Tuesday. So there will probably be a decision from the appellate court sometime maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. Maybe it will go longer than that. But then there will undoubtedly be an appeal to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can decide to accept that case for appeal, or it may decide not to. That remains to be seen. But if the Supreme Court decides to take this issue up on appeal, that will have a slightly longer briefing schedule because, of course, what the Supreme Court says applies everywhere in the nation.
Yeah, David, as these court cases are playing out, protests continue in Los Angeles, multiple arrests. Did we see any major clashes last night?
No major clashes last night, and I'll get to that in a minute, but I just want to show you, as I was watching this legal battle play out last night, what I was wondering was, here where the National Guard troops have been posted up for the last week, when I come out tomorrow morning, will I see them here or not? And as you can see, here they are. That remains unchanged. The dynamic of the protests, what we've been seeing is protesters coming out in the late afternoon and into the evening. The numbers have been dwindling, but they're still substantial, protesters in the several hundreds. And there are you know, the atmosphere has become very peaceful, very celebratory, pretty joyous. And then going into the evening, there are some tense moments, confrontations, and usually arrests numbering in the dozens from local law enforcement, the LAPD. I do think the confrontations that do happen more as a result of the pretty overwhelming and aggressive posture of law enforcement in the face of these protests rather than the behavior of the protesters themselves. What I've observed is that law enforcement isn't allowing protesters to gather in one place for a very substantial period of time at all before they start kettling them, displaying pretty quickly resorting to less lethal munitions, and bringing in mounted troops, that kind of thing, and just trying to clear people. That means that the tactics have shifted a little bit to more kind of wildcat marches where these groups of people move quickly down the streets of downtown LA. Going into the weekend, Anna, the stakes are extremely high. The stakes are very high for this legal battle about the deployment of the National Guard, but the stakes going into the weekend for these protests are tremendous. The people that I'm talking to in this growing movement, in the civil society groups that have contributed to this movement, both in years past and today, they feel like this is a huge moment for them. Either they will come out in massive numbers and protest peacefully, or things will devolve, as they did last weekend, into disorder. And which direction that goes will determine which side of this, increasingly heated political confrontation proves to be on, the higher ground in terms of whether the National Guard is justified in being here, and whether the Marines are justified in being here, and which way public opinion goes with respect to these increasingly aggressive immigration enforcement operations we're seeing not just here in Southern California, but around the country.
Yeah, this is a big test for our country. David Noriega and Carol Lamb, thank you both.